segment. It's going to be like a couple minutes.
10 minutes. Hello and welcome to CoinDesk live from the Ondo Summit. This is the first ever Ondo Summit and we are coming to you live from New York City. Today, Ondo Finance unveiled its integrated infrastructure suite to bring US financial markets onto the blockchain. Now, with this release, the firm has also announced Ondo Chain, a layer 1 blockchain built to support institutional grade financial markets. I'm your host, Jen Sanasi, here with my co-host, CoinDesk Indices Head of Product and Research, Andy Bear. Andy.
Hey, Jen.
I am so happy to see you here. We are in the heart of New York. If you just look outside the window, you see the yellow taxi cabs, the tall buildings. Talk to me about the vibe here this morning.
It feels very uptown, right?
It
does.
You
have a dress code, a corporate dress code. You have a serious money event, and then you have a lot of people who are native to the digital asset industry. So this is kind of what we're aiming for when we say B2B, institutionalization, future of finance. So it feels like this is the place to be.
I think you captured that exactly right. It feels very TradFi, and I used to host a show on CoinDesk called The Hash. We would call it The Road to Boring. This feels very much like The Road to Boring, established, right?
Yes, that's right.
The industry is becoming more established, and it's not only TradFi. There are folks from Stellar here, there are folks from Ripple, from Sui, from many of the protocols that we see at the more crypto native conferences. And so it's really nice to see them mingling in the same room, having discussions, and talking about how to further the future of finance.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. You think of institutionalization, you think about, okay, our pension fund's going to buy Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. The more important side of institutionalization is how is money going to work?
Mm-hmm.
How are people going to keep value on chain with yield, hosting it as collateral, having it be viewed by the people who are at risk to it, have it move swiftly in a public way, but still in a secure way, so that you can actually meet traditional finance right in the middle of the bridge. Mm-hmm. This feels like the epicenter of that conversation, and so it's again, really exciting to be here and to see this announcement.
All right, we'll be coming to you live for the next 2 hours, and you won't want to go anywhere because we'll be joined at the desk by some of the top builders, financial leaders, and regulatory leaders who are working to accelerate the future of finance. Let's get right to it and kick off the day with Ondo Finance founder and CEO, Nathan Allman. Nathan, congratulations on this event.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's really exciting to see everyone in the room together, and all the Ondo branding everywhere. We just unveiled our new brand a few days ago, so It's great to see it in the live.
It's interesting. The choice of venue is perfect because it's it's jazz, which when jazz was brought to Lincoln Center, it was kind of a new thing, right? Columbus Circle, when it was renewed, kind of felt like a new thing. Yet, you could confuse the crowd here with their attire and their demeanor for somebody seeing kind of a piece of serious music. So it feels like a very serious event, and I think your announcement this morning really opens a new chapter for how serious money moves around on blockchains. So maybe we want to start by just recapping what the gist of the announcement is about the blockchain and about what you're going to bring to finance.
Yeah, absolutely. So a few days ago, we announced Global Markets, which is our platform to tokenize exposure to U.S. public securities for a non-U.S. audience. And it's really our first large-scale foray into tokenization. We have a couple of single products right now, tokenized treasuries. But as we went down the rabbit hole of how do we really scale this up to thousands of securities and to working with distribution partners, both in TradFi and in crypto, we found a lot of infrastructure challenges. Really both with conventional public blockchains and with permission chains. With respect to conventional public blockchains, there's a ton of fragmentation across tons and tons of L1s and L2s, and issuing tokenized real-world assets across all of these different chains and keeping liquidity connected is enormously risky, difficult, expensive. These are pain points we felt even on a small scale of doing that with our two tokenized treasuries products, USDY being on 8 or 9 chains right now. And so, that that fragmentation is one of the things we're trying to address with Ondo Chain, which we're calling the omni-chain network for real-world assets. And it's really meant to be a hub for the initial issuance of tokenized real-world assets that we can then distribute and bridge to the broader public and permission blockchain ecosystems.
Tell us a little bit more about how it addresses that fragmentation.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's a number of things we're doing under the hood, but one example is that validators in Ondo Chain will actually be running a cross-chain bridge themselves. Specifically, we've partnered with Layer 0, and they'll be running DVNs to connect to different chains while having redundancy so that you're not reliant on any single bridge or other technical provider. And then with respect to connectivity to TradFi and addressing some of the fragmentation there, a number of the validators will be permissioned financial institutions, including broker-dealers, who can do things like purchase a security on a traditional stock exchange or other traditional liquidity source, and then mint a token with very, very low latency because they're actually involved in validation of the network.
So that's interesting, right? You're talking about interoperability. You're talking about lowering fees, but this permission part is important because you're recognizing that the needs of minting for an institution, which really has to make sure it gets all its ducks in a row, right, before is going to be different from minting a meme coin, right? And rather than using a public blockchain and having it adapt and not quite getting there, you're saying this is purpose-built for that, so that collateral can be observed, so that only known or specific parties can participate, and so that there's a different layer of amount of trust that'll come out of the products that are minted. Is that kind of where we're going? It's not total decentralization, but it's something right meeting in the middle of the bridge.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think it's important to really emphasize that this is a hybrid approach, right? It's not, a conventional public chain or permission chain. There's permission validators, but access is generally speaking open, right? Anyone can have a wallet, anyone can deploy code, and so on. It's been interesting to observe, we've seen so much work at these extremes, of the banks working on their totally permissioned walled gardens, only the banks can even see what's on the chain, right? I mean, in some respects, it might as well not be a blockchain. And then you have all these public chains that are so focused on censorship resistance and, extreme decentralization to varying degrees for sure. But when you're already dealing with real-world assets, you just don't need the true trustlessness to the same degree that most public blockchains are focused on. So we really like this hybrid approach. I mean, I think commercially, you don't give up much by permissioning validators. A lot of public blockchains, while they're not open about it, they already have de facto permission validators, especially in their early to medium stages of their decentralization journey. So I think what people care about is open access to deploy code, to have a wallet, to hold an asset, to view the chain, and we're generally speaking enabling all of that on Ondo Chain.
There is an interesting piece here that I want to talk about, and that's the staking of real-world assets. Talk to us a little bit about how Ondo is enabling that and what the compliance and regulatory side of that looks like.
For sure. Yeah, this is something we're really excited about. I mean, honestly, this was the first feature that we conceived of when we were, thinking about the design of our own chain. It really stemmed from an observation of the incredibly high security costs that every new layer 1 blockchain pays to bootstrap their own network, right? I mean, and this is in the form of inflationary token rewards, often in the hundreds of millions, per year that these chains pay to bootstrap security. And again, when you're in this framework of already needing to trust and rely on custodians and other regulated financial institutions to back real world assets, there's no need for a new disconnected digitally native asset to secure the chain. And so we can use things like tokenized treasuries as staking collateral, which you really might analogize in traditional finance to just like simple collateral, like many financial institutions post at a lot of financial utilities, like clearinghouses, for instance, that ensures their good behavior generally. It's a loose analogy, but you're trusting them, but they're posting collateral that you can seize, so it's not like an unsecured recourse.
A lot of people in digital assets, especially the early crusaders, had, let's call it, a complicated relationship with banks and traditional financial institutions. I think it's important they understand how critical this framework is, right, to improving things for everybody, including themselves ultimately. What's a great way to sort of chunk that into intuition so that folks who are, I think, really are maxi decentralized people and maxi public blockchain people, how can they conceive of the utility of this hybrid approach and how it will benefit them ultimately?
Yeah, I mean, folks in the crypto ecosystem have a lot of different goals, right? And I think that, for Bitcoin, for instance, the thesis of truly censorship-resistant store of value does hinge on true trustlessness and not relying on or even needing cooperation from banks, et cetera. I think even in that case, things like the Bitcoin ETFs and regulated custody of Bitcoin, which hopefully we'll see more of post SAB 121 being repealed, are still good for that mission, but are less critical than, of course, what we're doing in our space, which is really all about expanding global access to initially U.S. publicly traded securities that are hard to reach in a variety of emerging markets for many people.
Really quickly before we wrap up here, what kind of demand is there for what you're building? How did you assess that?
We really assessed it from distribution partners. We're primarily B2B2C focused in global markets, and that's both with crypto native platforms, wallets, protocols, exchanges, where we've seen a lot of demand. We've spoken with tons of these companies, and they're very, very interested, and they know their users are interested in securities exposure, but in many cases, they haven't known how to deliver that historically. And there's some special use cases there, like things like cross-collateralization between both crypto and securities, which you really can't do anywhere right now. And then I'd say the less obvious demand is from the more traditional distribution partners like fintech broker-dealers outside the US who have really high costs and friction in operating their business today. You hear Vlad, the Robinhood CEO, talk about how running their crypto business is 10 times cheaper than the traditional business. Like, some of that is because of regulatory and compliance differences, but a lot of it is just because of the infrastructure. So yeah, we're also really excited to work with those more traditional players on distribution.
Nathan, thanks so much for kicking the show off with us here. We'll let you get back to the event, and congratulations on the launch.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Nathan.
That was Ondo Finance founder and CEO, Nathan Allman. All right, Andy, you're staying with me now, and we're just going to...
Great. Thank you.
Andy was trying to run away from me. We're going to get to our next conversation now. Wisdom Tree Head of Digital Assets, Will Peck, is joining us at the desk. Hello.
Hey, Jen, how are you? Hey, Andy.
Good. Hey. Andy tried to run away from you just now.
Andy,
I know.
come on.
I don't know why Andy did that. All right. Andy and I were talking at the beginning of the show about how this event really kind of is an example of the TradFi world really starting to connect with the crypto DeFi world, something that we haven't really seen a lot of in the past. Talk to me about that convergence in your world.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, this is a fantastic event, fantastic venue. Thank you very much to the Ando team for putting it on. I think that's exactly right. We've done a lot of, I referred to this on the panel I did earlier today. I've been going to tokenization events for, I don't know, 5, 6 years now. This is probably one of the nicest venues for them, but I think also the ethos here of not trying to run away from like crypto and DeFi, but understanding that a lot of what you're doing with tokenization is trying to build products and services for people who get value from crypto and DeFi, which is a different shift from where it might have been in the past, where you had a lot of big banks saying, oh, I'm going to build this big private blockchain that's going to do all this stuff and everything, which was actually kind of, to me, almost like anathema to like crypto and like the stuff you get with public permissionless blockchains. So I do think this conference and really the industry has been more welcoming of crypto, not to say all parts of crypto, but certainly public blockchains, which is, I think, where the value is going to come from tokenization.
WisdomTree has always staked out the unknown, right,
Yep.
and provided trust. So people, when they think of WisdomTree, they're going to think of something, maybe I don't quite understand this, but I know these people are going to help me get there. Digital assets have been no exception, but still, there's still a divide when people are thinking about digital assets between access to something like Bitcoin and tokenizing another asset. And how should your customers think about those two product lines? How do your salespeople think about those two product lines and reconciling them? Because they're kind of new wine in an old glass and old wine in a new glass,
Exactly.
right?
I think that's a great point. And
Yeah.
first of all, thank you for the compliment on WisdomTree. We take pride in that. We always want to do right by our customers. And WisdomTree's history, going back to being one of the original ETF firms, has kind of been that building that trust with your customers is a big part of it. So I think they're two very different sales, frankly, to two very different audiences, right? So our sales force in the United States, for example, is focused on, amongst all of the other products that we have, Bitcoin, BTCW, our Bitcoin ETP. For that's just answering questions around like, how does this fit in a portfolio? How does the product work, et cetera, for our traditional client set, being financial advisors, at the big wirehouses or independent firms, for example. The tokenization side, going back to the first point, is different. I think this is serving a different audience of people, some of whom are in the United States, some offshore, of saying, hey, for whatever reason, I want to be on chain, right? I want to hold my US dollars in stable coins, for example, but I want things like yield, or I might want access to the US equity markets or stuff like that, still within that same infrastructure with the same trading mechanisms that I have in DeFi. And that's who we want to serve there. So it is a very different, like our sales force is not selling these tokenized products. It's really about, selling into this new audience of people who want to be on chain for their own reasons.
For a long time, Will, it felt like there was almost this resistance from traditional financial firms when it came to the adoption of the things that we're talking about today. And all of a sudden, it seems like that's shifted, and it no longer takes a long time to make things happen in these big institutions. And I'd love to juxtapose that against what's happening on the regulatory front in the US. What do you think changed and shifted to kind of accelerate all the innovation we're talking about here today?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think the career risk of wanting to do stuff in this space within a firm has certainly gone down. I think it was hard, especially for banks with kind of a very strict federal banking regulators at different level, for wanting to engage in the space, even if it wasn't at various levels, right? And you could say the same thing for asset management, broker dealers with the SEC. So obviously, there was an election recently. I don't know if you heard. But I think either way, we would have seen change in DC at the federal level. But certainly with the Trump administration, very pro-innovation for fintech broadly and crypto specifically. And I think the things that you're seeing there is a tone shift in this, certainly with the SEC having new task force, et cetera. Now, this stuff will still take time. Like, I don't think these things happen overnight. So I think some people might be a little bit too bullish on like this changing tomorrow. But I sense a definite shift in tone in the regulatory environment, which is going to allow big financial institutions to do more in the space and hopefully offer products to customers that are better for customers, right? That's what we're ultimately trying to do.
ETFs are only a, 26, 27, maybe 30-year-old instrument which revolutionized a lot of finance. They started as an instrument of liquidity, of tax efficiency, of trading efficiency. I certainly remember the old days of Qs and spiders kind of lighting things up, and then WisdomTree coming up and opening up. Is the ETF wrap? It feels like it's almost getting a little stretched too far in different directions, different regulators, 19b4s, filings. Is it time to update the ETF structure in such a way that it can do more things, since it's so well adopted?
That's a good question. I mean, I think you've seen some of that when I've been at WisdomTree for 10 years, and a lot more ETF products required a 19b4 at the time, which was kind of outside of generic listing standards, and that's changed. There's been a bit more generic rules, right? And I think the rules in place for ETFs have developed, but even things like, with the Bitcoin ETFs, unable to do in-kind creation redemption, right? So like something that most people on the street would not appreciate at all, but the sponsors, the market makers acknowledge that this would make a better product. So I think there's some of that you're going to see coming forward. I don't know, I think there's still trillions to come in ETFs. Like, I don't see that structure in terms of, I have a brokerage account, I want to get access to the US equity market. The ETF is going to continue to be the best way to do that. What I see happening over time with tokenization is saying, hey, there's other people who don't have a brokerage account, don't want to have a brokerage account, have a wallet. For whatever reasons, like I said, they like the instant control of their money, self-custodial solutions that being on-chain provides to them. And I think those people deserve good products too. I think those products should be transparent, tax efficient, have the same liquidity and standardization that the ETF has brought to things in brokerage accounts. So for me, that's how I see that developing. I don't think the ETF is going away anytime soon in that regard.
Do you think we're going to see other crypto ETFs this year, maybe an XRP or a SOL?
Yeah, I can't comment on any specific WisdomTree filings, of course, but certainly there seems to be a more welcoming attitude generally towards crypto assets. And I expect you to see more development there. Certainly we've seen just a ton of industry filings. That's not a surprise. ETFs are an incredibly competitive industry. People always want to get a leg up by launching a new product or something like that. I do think there's going to continue to be, particularly in the US, a framework around this, and not everything's going to come to the market immediately. Any token that gets launched, right? There's liquidity and other standards that you need to have for it. But I would expect to see more kind of innovation on like what tokens can be wrapped in an ETF, but also, like I said earlier, what ETFs, the functionality that they have, right? So in-kind creation redemption, that's a big thing for the market. Staking is going to be a big thing for proof of stake coins as well. So I suspect you're going to see more of that in the US, which is frankly where the European market is today.
I think that tokenizing things like treasuries for offshore consumption, is a toe in the water. But if you think about what the ETF wrapper can do to bring other tokenized things into US investors' portfolio, that must be in your mind somewhere, right, for the future?
Yeah, I think you can get lots of creative ideas in terms of accessing, if DeFi or other things are creating real sustainable yields or investment opportunities, like the US retail investor, provided it meets all the standards, should ideally be able to get access to those, right? So I do see more stuff like that coming. I think, there's a lot of kind of junk out there too, and you want to be careful not to do that. But I do think that's going to be something that happens in the future.
Well, thanks so much for joining us here, and we hope you enjoy the rest of the event.
Thanks a lot, Jen. Thanks, Andy.
Thank you.
That was WisdomTree Head of Digital Assets, Will Peck. We are going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
We all want to believe in something. In Chinese, belief also means trust. We want to trust our systems and each other to explore new frontiers and build a future beyond what we know. For the past 10 years at Consensus, pioneers, builders, and dreamers have gathered together to create a new financial system where everyone has value. Join us at Consensus Hong Kong, where belief becomes real.
Hello, you are watching CoinDesk Live. We are coming to you live from the Ondo Summit in New York City. Joining me now is someone who championed crypto when he was the House Financial Services Committee Chairman. Chairman Patrick McHenry is at the desk. Hello.
Great to be with you, Jen.
Welcome.
Awesome to be here at this great event.
Welcome to New York.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What a messy welcome, but it's nice and warm in here.
It is nice and warm in here.
Ondo's put on a great event.
Well, you know, the conversations we've had up until now have really been about this event exemplifying the convergence of TradFi and the digital asset world. And this is something that you worked for a long time in your career. Just talk to me about being here and seeing folks from the traditional firms like Franklin Templeton, like Wisdom Tree, and then people from protocols like Ripple and Stellar, all in here having conversations and driving the financial space forward.
Look, I think this is a great example of the crypto summer that we're in, right? After facing this winter for the last couple of years and the regulatory lockdowns in Washington, to see this start opening up again and us getting back into these conversations about how you can take traditional financial products that are available, but in a more analog-based system, and fully digitizing it. It's using the best software, the best technology possible to give the consumers what they want faster, better, and cheaper. And so this is the easiest, I don't want to say easiest, but perhaps the first wave of crypto awakening will come from TradFi adapting and using new tools that they've wanted to use, but regulators in Washington were so doubtful and pulled them back from doing the things that they wanted to do. And now they can see that they can hitch up and go. And this is really the first wave that will happen in TradFi using platforms like Ando and then the tools that they're building for TradFi to link them up with consumers.
I want to talk about Washington for a second because I think that there are people in this industry who still feel like legislation isn't moving fast enough. We had that press conference the other day from the crypto and AI czar, David Sachs. Markets really kind of didn't react to that at all. As a matter of fact, I think they went a little down after the press conference. What would you tell those people on how things move in Washington?
Slow. But okay, so the initial thing here, after the election, everybody's like, we've won. There is no permanent victory, there's no permanent defeat in Washington. Yes, the election was a bipartisan victory for crypto. And to have the public stand with crypto campaign unlock this thing where Democratic and Republican members of Congress understood it's safe and good to be with this new technology. That's victory one. Then victory two is getting the proper regulators in the proper seats so that you can start writing regulation, getting congressional committees rolling on an agenda so that legislation, law can change, so we don't ever have to deal with what we've dealt with in the last 4 years of regulators and an administration being so woefully anti-crypto. Those two things take more time. It takes time for Senate confirmation for those important seats of financial regulators. That will come across this whole year. And it may take 18 to 20 months before we can actually see law enacted that will affect crypto in a substantial and structural way. A market structure bill, a definition of what is a digital asset and the nature of it, giving it its own fit for purpose set of regulations. French Hill is leading this effort as chair of the House Financial Services Committee. He's put together a subcommittee. I started the Digital Asset Subcommittee, and first one of its kind in Congress. French has taken that and enhanced it. And so they're driving legislation. We'll see votes in committee. We'll see hearings. But it's not going to be at the speed of crypto. It's not going to be the speed of the need and the desperate need for us to get a better competitive landscape in the United States. So that is going to have to be like tap the brakes, slow your roll. It's going to take a little time to actually get DC to change law, but it's coming.
Well, make sense of that for me, because you just said 18 to 20 months. We heard in the press conference we could have a stablecoin bill or FIT21 in 100 days. You mentioned the speed at which this industry innovates at. Make sense of that for me. What happens in the next 18 to 20 months? Is it still this ambiguity for crypto firms in the United States?
Okay, so let's start here.
Okay.
You have financial regulators. This is the first wave. The president has to nominate heads of agencies. You see cabinet appointees being confirmed, first with the Treasury Secretary, Bassett, being confirmed with a wide bipartisan majority. That is the first wave, Treasury. Getting Treasury right means that you get a proper view of the tax implications of digital assets. It means that you have the folks that are designing policy for the administration in the White House with the National Economic Council and with Treasury working on policy and the administration's view of what we do in crypto. That's happening. Then you have important financial regulators like the Vice Chair for Supervision at the Federal Reserve has to be nominated. The head of the OCC, the Office of Comptroller of the Currency, which will have an important role in a stablecoin regime. The Fed, OCC. FDIC, you have to have a chair of the FDIC confirmed. And you have to have a chair of the Securities and Exchange Commission and a chair of the CFTC. Those things are not done yet.
Yeah.
So you have to get people in their seats, and then once you get them in your seats, then you see the regulatory machinations. That's one element. The Hill is different. And that's where that action will take. It works at a different pace for legislating on the Hill. So you'll see hearings coming in the coming weeks and months. Hearings lead to legislation coming out of committee, going to the House floor, passing the House floor, going to the Senate. That is a longer process. And that is why I say this is not a 100-day proposition in all likelihood, but it could be moved up based on the president prioritizing this as he has.
Do you have FOMO watching this from the outside?
A little bit.
Yeah?
Yeah, because the stuff that I've spent my whole career working on, using technology in the world of finance, opening up from our traditional regulatory approach to using modern techniques with software, with technology. All of this stuff is coming, the wave is cresting. And there's now massive momentum with bipartisan legislating, a clear electoral mandate, and a president who says, this is a priority, we're going. And that, to the point where President Trump appointed a crypto and AI czar, right? High prioritization for the administration to say, we have somebody like David Sachs who is best in class, world class, devoting himself, and then he's building a team. And the team that he's built out on crypto and AI is jaw-droppingly awesome. It's incredible. It's technology incredible. It's VC incredible. It is the world of crypto incredible. It's so amazing. So all that stuff says there is momentum here. And for me to be out there surfing waves that are small and trying to get some movement here, and now I see, like, look, surf's up. And I'm sitting on the beach. It doesn't feel quite the same.
Are you going to work in the crypto industry?
There's a lot of my public policy work I'm now trying to apply in the private sector.
Yeah?
So crypto, AI, fintech.
Okay.
This world I'm so fascinated by, so interested in. That's why I'm here with Ando, and to talk about those things that are necessary for us to get the full benefit of crypto. And applying it to TradFi and getting consumer benefit. Yeah,
you know, I got to ask you, we were just talking about the chairs that still need to come in. At the CFTC, we have acting chair Caroline Pham. It's not clear if the president is going to choose a chair for the CFTC. It seems like he's waiting to see how things pan out. We have the Department of Government Efficiency looking at maybe the CFTC and the SEC should be one. What are your thoughts there? Do you think the CFTC and the SEC could come together and just be one regulatory body?
I doubt it, and I highly doubt it. I do think the president will nominate in short order a chair of the CFTC. I think that's coming, and I don't think that's months away. And combining these agencies has been around for a long time. I don't think that should be a high priority. I think we need to get the law right, and I think we need to go as fast as we can on getting crypto law, digital asset law, and regulation that conforms with the needs of the consumer, of our capital markets, and catches us up to the rest of the world.
Yeah.
I think it's really a high imperative.
Do you think the U.S. can catch up to the rest of the world?
I think so. I think we can. I think we have to. And now you have an administration that says we will. That is a beautiful and good thing.
I got to ask you about the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve. It's all anyone in this industry talks about. I know when Lummis presented the plan last summer at the Bitcoin conference, it was a Bitcoin Strategic Reserve. Now we're talking about maybe a crypto stockpile that could have other digital assets. What are your thoughts there? Do you have one preference over the other?
No, and it's something I don't need to spend. I don't want to spend a ton of time on. Because I think we have such a massive debt and deficit, budget deficit, that we have to get government efficiency going. That is the imperative. You see President Trump announce that we're going to have a sovereign wealth fund. Something like this might fall into some thinking like that on how we invest in ourselves to compete with the rest of the world. I think the good news is we are still the place where global capital wants to come. And we are where technologists want to be because of our legal rights, our open, deep, and liquid financial markets, our rule of law. I think we have such great benefits that the rest of the world wants to come and participate and be a part of what is the United States. And I think of that as cultural, and I mean that as like the big, like, we are an open society. We believe in the rule of law, we believe in speech rights, and we've exported that. That is the greatest good that we've exported in the United States. So I think it's imperative that we get those things right. The details of this stuff I leave to other people.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting you say that. I was talking to SEC Commissioner Peirce yesterday about her crypto task force. One of the mandates there is to create a regulatory sandbox for folks to experiment in, but not only in the US, almost looking at cross-border experimentation. Do you see any challenges with that?
So this approach of beta testing or regulation, that's in essence what we were talking about with sandboxes. This is an idea that I've kicked around. I had legislation related to it. Hester Peirce has been a fantastic ally and a big thinker on this concept. And now she's in a position to go effectuate that. It is such a welcome and good thing. It will be so good and will put us in a premier position internationally to have the highest and best, the highest use of our capital and the most efficient use of our capital as it relates to government regulation. It is so necessary.
All right, just before we wrap up, I gotta ask you again, what's next for you?
Yeah, I'm putting that together.
Yeah.
I've affiliated as a senior advisor with Stripe. I think they're a fantastic technology company, and proud to join that team and to help the next stage of growth. And then I've enjoyed speaking at conferences like this one today. And I think what Ando is doing is a fantastic approach to tokenize real-world assets, put them on chain, and give consumers exposure to these products that they so desperately want. This is a nice merger of TradFi and crypto, and so it's fun being engaged in things like this as well. But more to come, more announcements to come, and more work to be done.
Chairman, thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with me. I hope you enjoy the rest of the event.
Thanks, Jen. You're the best.
You're the best. All right, that was former House Financial Services Committee Chairman Patrick McHenry. We are just getting started here at the Ondo Summit. Andy Baer is joining me again. Andy, what did you get up to while you stepped away from the desk?
There's so many people out there to see. Wynn had to pull me away to bring me back up here. So everybody is here today. This is a fantastic event.
Well, we're going to get right into our next conversation. Join me in welcoming to the desk Stellar Development Foundation Chief Business Officer, Raja Chakravorti. Hey.
Hi, how are you?
Nice to have you here. We're doing fantastic. How are you enjoying the event?
It's amazing. There are so many impactful people here. I'm learning a lot. It is an awesome event. The weather could be better, but otherwise we're great.
Yeah, everyone's complaining about the weather, but we're having a good time in here.
My son complained he didn't get a snow day today. I think I think I could have gotten to school.
Yeah, he should protest.
He should, yeah.
All right, we're talking about tokenization here. We're looking at it through a bunch of different lenses. I guess from your perspective, sitting at the Stellar Development Foundation, why does this matter in the way that we're talking about it today?
Yeah, I mean, I think tokenization is a lot more than just creating digital assets, we really take this idea that it's about creating efficiency, it's about creating greater accessibility, and ultimately our premise is that Stellar should be built for where blockchain meets the real world. And so when I think about tokenization, the types of projects we're really, really proud of are things like our partnerships with the United Nations. So the UNHCR used Stellar to distribute aid into Argentina, has used it to distribute aid into the Ukraine, and the idea was about tokenizing what would typically be a cash donation. And through the adoption of those digital technologies, UNHCR has actually saved $12 million. I think similarly, when you think about accessibility, you're actually thinking about how people can get access to financial products that they otherwise wouldn't have been able to do. So take Franklin Templeton, for example. So they have their FOBXX money market fund. It's the tokenized money market fund represented by the Benji token. And when you think about a money market fund, it can typically cost like $3,000 plus to be able to enter into that. But through Benji, you can enter into it as little as $20. Coupled with that, on the Stellar network, Franklin Templeton has done about 226,000 transactions at a cost of 104 XLM total. So if you think about that, that's like micro transactions of a penny per transaction. That is really impactful because it's creating broad scale accessibility. And so when I think about it from the idea of an investor side, you have access to so much more, but from the business side, you also have so much efficiency, and that's where I think tokenization is tremendously powerful.
So are you so Stellar is sort of the last mile then, right? All this stuff gets built, but that last mile of road has to be paved efficiently, low cost to get to the actual end user. Is this where you're entering?
Well, that's an awesome question for me. I mean, we are a network, we are a layer 1 blockchain, and so we are the network upon which the transaction will flow. But our focus at Stellar has really been designed around this last mile solution. And so our focus has been the idea that, look, who is really going to benefit from a transaction? We focus very much on payment financing or PayFi. So cross-border transactions, remittances, those sorts of things. We spent a lot of effort building out a network of 150 ramp partners plus, and one of those ramp partners is MoneyGram, and MoneyGram has 450,000 physical locations. So we're accessible in 170 countries with the ability for consumers to transact using the blockchain in a cryptocurrency, but then be able to off-ramp it in a number of different ways. They can either do it directly to their bank, they can do it through mobile money if that's the best case, or they can actually go to a physical location and cash out. And that is really the power of the Stellar network. And to me, that is where, when you think about tokenization, it is really about how this whole blockchain can actually meet the real world and solve real problems for the people it's helping.
In this scenario that you just explained to us, does the customer know that they're interacting with crypto?
I mean, I think the ideal scenario is that the customer never knows. I mean, I think that's truly the future, is that it is really just an infrastructure play, an infrastructure technology. I think if you are in Africa, one part of Africa, for example, I think the idea that you can hold dollars in a digital, a US dollar-backed digital currency, like USDC, that is super powerful. I don't think they really care whether or not it is a cryptocurrency or not. It is just knowing that, hey, I didn't have to go run out and buy dollars and get, tagged on how much I can actually convert, but that it is actually something that I can use in a digital manner and be able to transact on it. And so, no, I think the answer is, if you're doing it right, you're obfuscating that whole thing.
When you think about what was announced this morning with the new chain happening and this kind of semi-permission kind of hybrid model for serious financial instruments, collateral movement, big storage of value, compliance, is this something that you're just eager to latch onto and then find users, pave the last mile, have things move on, bridge, I guess, to Stellar, and then get on to their final destination?
Yeah, I mean, look, when I think about, I try to think about it in relatively basic terms. And so what do I think is really important in the future? I think the first is this idea of interoperability, which was talked about today. But being able to have assets transact across different chains, very important if you're going to issue an asset. Two is regulatory clarity. And we're not just talking about in the United States, but also in all the domiciles from which the cryptocurrency will move from place to place. But third, and I think this is really important, and I think we sometimes ignore it, we say infrastructure, but I mean like truly, what is the infrastructure that can handle a enterprise level asset issuer on chain? And so one of the focuses we have, and I'm using this opportunity to talk a lot about Stellar, but we have, in the history, our 10-year history for Stellar, only had 16 minutes of downtime. So I come from a technology background. I translate that to a 99.9987% uptime, almost 5 nines of uptime. To me, that is the level of infrastructure that you need to really be able to showcase the value here, because that's what's going to get everybody truly comfortable with this sort of technology. And for me, I think I'm really excited about anyone who's coming into this space if it is going to make it better. And ultimately, I think we as an industry owe it to ourselves and owe it to the people we're trying to help to make sure that we hold ourselves to these incredibly high standards, because that's where we're going to make a lot of impact.
Is the infrastructure, in your opinion, is it ready for mainstream adoption?
Well, I think that's a wonderful question. So I kind of put ourselves in this area today where we're kind of like in this pilot phase. So you see a lot of pilots, a lot of the institutional clients that are talking today, it's incredibly exciting, but it's really early on. What I'm hoping for, let's project 3 years out, is that a lot of those infrastructure answers, a lot of that stability has been resolved, because the reality is it is new technology. And anytime you see new technology adoption, there are going to be some of those trials and tribulations. But ultimately, I think learning from those who have been there, who have actually solved some of those really critical problems, and notwithstanding the idea of last mile, like what is it we're actually trying to solve? The technology is great, but the technology is only there if it actually helps us get from point A to point B and really make those two things happen. I think that's what really has to happen. So today, not yet, but my hope is that with innovations that we are seeing around here and that what we are working on at Stellar, that it will truly be there.
Take that question and maybe zoom in on interoperability, because that's critical, right?
Yep.
For what we're hearing about today, what you're describing, that feels like the biggest blockade, doesn't it?
Yeah. I think interoperability is such an important thing. I kind of liken it to, if you're going to go ahead and try to issue in one place, you really just want to think about that thing being utilized by the end consumer or business that wants to use it. But the hurdles that we put almost in front of ourselves is this idea that, hey, I have to build to every single technology layer.
Right.
And boy, is that a hurdle, because it means a lot of engineering resources. It means that you're focusing on understanding the way different technology flows are. I'm not a technologist, I'm not a coder, but I'll tell you, like, being able to understand all of the different programming languages, that creates a lot of friction.
Right.
Having interoperability is the key to being able to build that. I actually think about USDC as an asset. And so one way to think about USDC is that it is the stablecoin that can be used to transmit from point A to point B. Okay, so you're on a network, I've got USDC, I want to send it to my family in Argentina, I can go ahead and leverage the Stellar network to do that. The second idea of it can be that it in and of itself is this bridge layer between multiple networks, because it is utilized across different ones. And so really, what do I care about as a consumer? I just care that the funds get to my family in Argentina. I care very little about what blockchain they're using or who else is using it. I just want to make sure that it can transact and that you're not losing any value between those two areas. The last piece of this, though, I think is the efficiency play. And again, we've talked a lot about efficiency throughout this conference, and I'm sure you guys talk about it all the time, but instant transaction settlements, 24/7 availability, full-time liquidity, like those are the value adds that you have here. And that's why you need to have interoperability, because if you didn't have interoperability, well, why even have these blockchains? You just use traditional financial systems.
Right, right. No, that's fantastic. I mean, I'm just thinking how hard it is for me to send a text message to somebody on an Android phone. I'm thinking like, we should be able
You
to
have
solve.
an Android?
Yeah, no, I don't. I have some
what we're
green
taking
green
away.
bubble friends, so who do. So no, but that's it's fantastic, and I think through this conversation, folks get a much better sense of how Stellar can attach to this, what we're announcing today, and how it reaches a bunch of different people.
Absolutely.
Raja, thanks so much for
Thank you so
joining
much.
us at the desk.
Yes,
And we
absolutely.
hope you enjoy the rest of the event.
Thank you so much.
Thank
It was
you.
great.
Awesome.
Appreciate it.
That was Stellar Development Foundation Chief Business Officer Raja Chakravorti. We are going to take a quick break. When we come back, more industry leaders will join us right here at this desk.
We all want to believe in something. In Chinese, belief also means trust. We want to trust our systems and each other to explore new frontiers and build a future beyond what we know. For the past 10 years at Consensus, pioneers, builders, and dreamers have gathered together to create a new financial system where everyone has value. Join us at Consensus Hong Kong, where belief becomes real.
Hello and welcome back to CoinDesk Live. We are coming to you from New York City at the first ever Ondo Summit. Today, Ondo Finance announced the launch of an integrated infrastructure suite that will bring U.S. financial markets on chain. The suite includes a layer 1 blockchain built to support institutional grade financial markets. I'm Jen Sanesi here with my co-host Andy Baer, and we are joined by our next guest, Ondo Finance Chief Strategy Officer Ian Bode. Ian.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. And, you know, we said this to Nathan earlier. Congratulations on the event.
Thank you.
It's fantastic. Any standout highlights so far?
It was nice to deliver the keynote and finally announce what we've been working towards for such a long time, particularly with the Ondo chain. The fact that, you know, so many institutions are here to also witness it and talk to, I think it's been a great event so far.
Yeah, you know, the narrative really has been this convergence of two worlds, the digital assets world and the TradFi world. And I know that you've had a long career
That's right.
helping traditional finance firms understand the digital asset space and adopt it. You were a consultant before, you're at Ondo Finance now. Talk me a little bit through that journey and maybe zoom in on the turning point that has made the announcement, like the announcement we heard today, possible.
Yeah. It's been a long journey. I did about 8 years at McKinsey & Company, the consulting, and I did my first digital asset project, I believe, in 2016. Back then, it was tokenization for a French bank. So even then, tokenization was a big topic, but obviously, you know, 9 years almost have passed, and we're just kind of still waiting on it. But I do think now feels dramatically different. The regulatory environment is about to change in a decent way. I'm sure you've had a couple of speakers already talk to that. But it's not just that. I think the capabilities that we're now seeing with a lot of these traditional financial institutions are dramatically different than when we first started in 2016. Back in 2016, you were literally telling people, what is a blockchain? How does it work? All these sorts of things. Now, particularly during the past bear market, a lot of these institutions, they did not stop hiring even after FTX happened. Right? So at FTX, when that happened, it was very clear certain institutions were leaving the space, call it almost the tourists, but certain institutions really decided to double down. And they really increased their hiring. Some of these teams at the major asset managers are now 25, 50, 75, even 100 people large, so they know what they're doing. And I feel like the liquidity on chain increasingly is there as well. There's over $200 billion in stable coins and tokenized treasuries now available. So with the fact that you have an increasingly friendly regulatory landscape, the capabilities within these institutions and the liquidity on chain that is there, really what was needed was the infrastructure to enable these institutions to come on chain in a bigger way, and that's why we announced the Ondo chain.
It's such an important, crypto started as a bunch of people in basements as a hobby and technologists, or as you said in your experience, individual financial institutions trying to, kind of roll their own inside their own laboratories. This idea of interoperability, standards for things like collateral management, value, permission, inspection, compliance, things like that. That requires coordination, right? And coordination has not been, I guess, digital assets' hallmark, hallmark property. So how do you actually do it? I mean, the wherewithal to actually say, fine, we're going to create a standard. We know what this side of the bridge's needs are. We know what this side of the bridge's needs are. How long did it take? What was the inspiration, and how do you muster up the courage to try to create that standard?
Yeah,
right?
No, it's a great question. I mean, I worked with most of these institutions that are here for many years, and do not underestimate their appetite to actually move on public blockchains. All of them want to, right? But for a very long time, they just haven't been able to, either because the regulatory environment wasn't there, or the infrastructure to move was not there. And so, I don't know, I've just been working at it, I guess, for 8 years. It's the reason why I joined Ondo in the first place, to be honest. When Nathan told me about the plan for Ondo Chain, I was like, this is it. This is exactly what's needed. Please, let's build it together and make it happen.
You think about a lot of how finance works here is self-regulatory organizations like FINRA and things like this, where banks really get together and agree on a set of standards so that they can operate in a way that's more, I guess, more detailed, more nuanced, more agile than a legislative regulatory framework. Do you think that we can adopt this kind of the plumbing of collateral management and compliance and who gets to see what? Is that the kind of framework that ultimately you want to see? Do we need more institutions to subscribe and get on board? Is that where this goes ultimately?
Yeah, I think so. And I think the beauty of public blockchain technology in and of itself is that a lot of these things come with their own standards, right? Just look at the EVM infrastructure, how these assets can get issued. All of these things are encoded. There was a big topic during one of the panels today. There's a lot of people now working towards standards for digital identity. So the technology in and of itself really allows for people to come together and agree on certain standards. What now I think is needed is more institutions to come on board, pick particular infrastructure and blockchains and say, we can make this work, this is what we're going to adapt.
You said something interesting there, that a lot of the firms have wanted to adopt blockchain technology, it's just they haven't been able to. And almost everyone who sat at this desk today has said something similar to this. But I think that there's been this perception that there was a resistance, and that's why it has happened kind of slowly. Talk to me a little bit about that, that narrative. Where did that come from?
Right. I think a lot of institutions initially were skeptical, but when you talk to them about a potential business case of blockchain, most of them has been interested, right? But it became really clear that there was quite a bit of money to be made in blockchains and digital assets more broadly after Coinbase went public. I distinctly remember a lot of calls from boardrooms, particularly in capital markets, that said, why are we not doing anything? This is clearly a very good business to be in. And now, recently, with Tether publishing their financials on a quarterly basis, I can guarantee you that the conversations are had that say, why do we not have our own stablecoin? Obviously, it's difficult to pull off, but I think that creates a specific appetite to go there, in addition to a lot of the theoretical and conceptual benefits of having rails that you can distribute assets to very globally, right? That's why the asset managers, I think, were first to understand the disruptive potential of this technology, and they were the first to move. With banks, historically, it's been a little bit more difficult, primarily because the regulators clamp down on them a little harder. But the appetite is there, and particularly once you see certain rules disappear in a more friendly regulatory environment, I think you'll see a lot of institutions move on chain.
You touched on something there, which is prompting the, does the world need a whole mess of stable coins, right? Is it going to be one trusted? Is it going to be competitive? Is it going to be segmented by marketplace? Like, where is that going to end up? I'm sure you're building out for any kind of eventuality there, but just put on your consultant hat where, as a business school case or as a McKinsey case, where do we end up 10 years from now? Is there only one and the others have withered, or are we comfortable with with several different forms of US dollar representation?
I think you'll still see different forms. Obviously, the bigger an asset, the more liquidity it has, the more attractive it is. But the asset right now with the largest liquidity is not necessarily the most attractive to every single institutional participant. So I think you'll continue to see some experimentation in the form of tokenized cash and in the form of tokenized treasuries. Obviously, Ondo fundamentally believes that tokenized treasuries are a better mousetrap than stablecoins. So I think you'll see that dynamic play out a little bit. But ultimately, I do think you'll end up with a few. I don't think you're going to end up with hundreds.
Okay, we gotta go, but I love business school use cases. So let's just our case study. Sorry. So let's just humor me. Andy asked if we need all of these stable coins. I'm going to ask you, do we need all of these layer ones? Is there going to be one layer one that dominates them all, especially when it comes to these more established firms?
I think we'll have plenty of layer ones. I mean, it's kind of playing out already, and I don't think a lot of them are disappear. We'll have, maybe fewer. But I think we're happy to work together with a lot of these various different blockchains. What's really needed, though, I think, is the connectivity between these various public environments. And then what no one's really done, but what the Ondo chain is a step forward to, is really connecting also the private environments into the public space. That really is the missing link, is how do you create a tight connection between on-chain and off-chain infrastructure to make all of that happen more seamlessly.
Ian, thank you so much for joining us here at the desk. It was a pleasure.
Thank you very much for having me.
Great. That was Ondo Finance Chief Strategy Officer Ian de Bode. All right, Andy, we are keeping the conversation going here.
I'm getting excited.
We've had a lot of great discussions here at the desk, haven't we?
Yeah, I think, it's natural for us to think about layer ones competing with each other, but now the idea of them attaching and being specialists in different segments, different regions, reaching different markets, and being able to attach to something like Ondo Chain to be able to, as a mothership, to be able to attach to those assets, which are going to be regulated and viewed in a different way. I think it's exciting. So my eyes are open to this now.
I'm with you on that one. If you are just joining us, we are coming to you live from the Ondo Summit in New York City. We've been having productive conversations here at the desk on the future of money and how traditional financial institutions, blockchains, and regulators can work together to usher us to the next era of finance. Now, this next interview is going to be a very special episode of Markets Daily. It's going to be on our Markets Daily podcast today, and it's going to be with our next guest, Head of Innovation, Research Strategies, and Technology at Franklin Templeton, Sandy Cole. Hello, nice to see you again.
Hello, so nice to be here with you guys.
Yeah, of course. Well, we're here at the Ondo Summit. I know that Franklin Templeton has joined the Ondo ecosystem.
Yes.
Talk to us a little bit about what that means to be in an ecosystem with so many TradFi firms like your own and so many innovative protocols, new layer ones, people who are, doing things quickly and breaking things.
Yeah. Well, so first off, we're very committed to helping this whole ecosystem grow, right? Franklin Templeton has been an early pioneer. We have been out on public blockchains since now 2022. And we are now operating across 8 different public blockchains and doing our own node verification across 12 public blockchains. And so when Ando approached us and talked about the interoperability they're trying to build between some of the public chains and some of the more traditional financial ecosystem, we thought that was a great opportunity set. We really want to bring as many of these players together as possible because that's how you start to get the real volumes starting to move. That's how you get the assets starting to flow in, is we need to create these pathways of connecting all these different pools of liquidity.
I like to call Franklin Templeton the degens of the TradFi space.
Yes,
They always have been, and very vocal, right? No, but out first and out strong in sticking to the ideals of the firm about investing in portfolio management and selection. I think it surprised the world in a nice way when the tokenized money market fund was launched so long ago. But you said it yourself now, it's 2.5 years later and we're only starting to see more use cases. So I think probably the word that we've heard the most, Jen, today is interoperability.
Yeah.
Interoperability and visibility into underlying assets and compliance and things like this are things that are required.
That's right.
But many public decentralized blockchains don't really offer that. So how critical is today's announcement to helping advance the cause of your products?
Yeah, well, first off, when you've been working across multiple chains, you really start to realize that not every chain is the same. right? And we have had to really develop our own frameworks for how do we allocate transactions, how do we think about the order sizes, how do we think about the client initiating the order, what is the right chain to put their trades onto, is the client themselves expressing a preference? So there's a great degree of complexity operating across multiple chains that we have been really navigating on our own. And I think that, this is a relearning every time you hook up to a new chain. So this idea that there could be someone else helping accelerate that speed of learning, I think could be very helpful for the ecosystem. And I think it will help other participants who haven't had the benefit of operating in this space for as long accelerate their entry. And that to me is a very big positive, because the more activity that's happening, the more the case becomes that firms need to think about revamping their existing technology, the more they think about the opportunities of the space. And so we need to reach a critical mass, and I think this is one of the good steps along the way to helping us reach critical mass in the industry.
I think I've asked you this before, but I think the audience will be interested in hearing, since we're talking about the chains that you work with, is what kind of due diligence do you do when you're evaluating the security of a chain?
Yeah, there's a tremendous amount of due diligence that goes into chain selection. And we've had to involve our enterprise risk team from Franklin Templeton. We've involved our operations and technology team, our audit teams. It's really quite a significant burden, because we need to trust that the chain is secure. We need to trust that the chain operates in a manner that we feel meets our due diligence as a fiduciary. And this is one of the reasons why we think running our own node operations has been so important, because you really don't know how a network operates unless you are a part of the network. And so I think it's a different attitude for an asset manager, particularly a traditional asset manager. But I think that we have always been very innovative, and we understand that you need to be part of an ecosystem to really understand how that ecosystem works.
It's a great point, because when you think about people who are trying to invest in digital assets because they think this chain or that chain is going to succeed, is going to prevail, virality is not enough, right?
That's right.
You need sustainability, ultimate plans, strategy, interoperability. Are you able to, Franklin Templeton, famous for fundamental research and understanding securities and other assets very well. Some of these thoughts and findings about ranking or using blockchains with your investment team, and does it help inform their investment process?
100%. So our investment teams really work hand in glove with our operational teams to understand, is everything the network is saying true? Are we finding a different experience? How are the volumes actually growing versus what we hear from the chains themselves they expect to grow? It's a great source of data. It's a great source of intelligence. And our investment teams are intimately incorporating all of these insights we get by operating into the ecosystem into our token level research, right? And so, even the way that the token pool is allocated among the community, when the unlocks are, what voting rights come along with them, these are all big considerations that we have in figuring out the value of a token. And what we're going to be putting into our own portfolios, because we trade multiple multi-coin portfolios at Franklin Templeton, and we want to make sure that we're picking those coins that we believe and through our own experience prove that they really do have the growth potential.
I want to come back to that security and due diligence piece for just a second. It sounds like there's a lot of resources put towards making sure something is secure and safe. Do you think that's a hindrance towards other more established firms taking the same approach?
Well, I think that any time an established player expands into a new market, into a new geography, into a new product set, there's a tremendous amount of setup and work that has to go into it. And this is something that these organizations, Franklin Templeton is 77 years old. We've been doing this for a long time, and so you get very good at doing this types of due diligence. The exciting thing with the digital ecosystem is that it's been creating new types of due diligence that never before. So how do you due diligence a staking protocol? How do you due diligence a proof of work protocol, right? These are things that we've had to kind of figure out, and I think that it really gives us an edge in how we choose to invest in the space.
One thing that we've learned over the last couple of years is that paving the way to retail or advised money in the United States, it's a rough path to go down unless there are ETF wrappers, and maybe ETFs are able to do some things, they're definitely not able to do others. What would you like to see in terms of paving the last mile to US investors so that they can get the benefit of the fundamental research and active selection you do at Franklin Templeton?
So I think that there's a few things that can happen, right? There are active strategies in ETF wrappers, and you need to be able to really think of an ETF wrapper as something very extensible, just like a token is extensible. Right, so I do believe we've already, and this is public information, have been approved to have a multi-coin ETF. That multi-coin ETF will continue to add coins over time as we increase our product set. That is right now a systematically managed fund, but there's no reason why we wouldn't be able over time to also create new types of products that actively manage our coin portfolios in an ETF wrapper. And until we kind of see more progress on the infrastructure side from the traditional firms, the ETFs really do provide such a beautiful bridge because they can commingle assets with the traditional equity and bond portfolios that most investors already hold. And indeed, we're starting to work our crypto ETFs into our model portfolios to really provide that diversified exposure and work our crypto ETFs into our benchmarks for those model portfolios so that you're really benchmarking the portfolio against the proper blend of assets. So it's a slow process, and the ETFs are really helping move us in the right direction. But it's really been such an important stepping stone because it really is bringing the two worlds so much closer together.
Sandy, thanks so much for joining us at the desk. We hope you enjoy the rest of the event.
Thank you guys so much.
Thanks,
Lovely
Sandy.
speaking with you.
That was Head of Innovation, Research Strategies and Technology at Franklin Templeton, Sandy Call. All right, Andy and I are going to take a quick break, but we will be right back with you in just a moment.
We all want to believe in something. In Chinese, belief also means trust. We want to trust our systems and each other to explore new frontiers and build a future beyond what we know. For the past 10 years at Consensus, pioneers, builders, and dreamers have gathered together to create a new financial system where everyone has value. Join us at Consensus Hong Kong, where belief becomes real.
and welcome back to the very first Ondo Summit. You are watching CoinDesk Live, and we are coming to you live from New York City, where Ondo Finance has brought together blockchain, regulatory, financial leaders to celebrate the launch of their new suite of infrastructure products designed to bring capital markets on chain, bringing transparency, efficiency, and accessibility, all enabled by blockchain technology to institutional grade finance. I'm Jen Sanasi, here with my co-host Andy Baer, and we are joined by Uniswap Labs COO Mary Katherine later. Hello.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. Now, we got to start here. Uniswap. When we think of Uniswap, we think of pure DeFi.
Yeah.
Here you are sitting at this event that's bringing together traditional financial leaders, DeFi leaders. Talk to me about how Uniswap Labs is thinking about making digital assets more accessible to institutional firms and investors.
So Uniswap Labs' mission is to unlock value through universal exchange. If you think about today's markets, you can only trade things that fit in today's markets, right? That's true for cryptocurrency markets and for traditional markets. And so you need more flexible, interoperable infrastructure to be able to have more things have the value realized. It's kind of like kinetic energy is a thing that are traded, but there's so much potential energy that can't be traded, that can't be realized because it doesn't fit in today's markets. So what does that mean for DeFi? Uniswap Labs has been the leader in DeFi, the leader in DeFi protocols, the leader in the products to access those protocols. And our objective in the past few years has been to make that infrastructure cheaper and faster. So we're launching Unichain, which is doing exactly that, and more customizable. And that's version 4 of the Uniswap protocol, which many other developers contributed to, but allows people to build their own hooks, to build their own market structure. So the best of DeFi is now ready for TradFi as well as for any anon who wants to trade meme coins. It's like the same infrastructure, and that's the point, is that you can now, as a creator of an asset or a token, or as a user who has your own priorities, say, I want to build a hook on Uniswap v4, and I want to use Unichain where it's cheaper and faster, and so many more things I think are going to start to come on chain because of that.
So critically important, and as you said, the best known name, I mean, I remember reading about it in the Campbell Harvey book like 4 or 5 years ago. But tell the new chain and the new version represent a little bit of a departure, right? It's like you have an exchange, people use it, but now much faster, much stronger, your own security and more functionality. Are you trying to reach new users? Are you trying to keep up with competition? Is it a strategy shift, or is it just an iteration of strategy?
I think it's an iteration of trying to make blockchains maximally accessible and maximally useful. So it's the same strategy. It's not a departure and it's not a shift. So anyone can use Unichain, anyone can use V4 and build on top of it. Right. But in the same spirit of permissionless innovation that's been the foundation of Ethereum and so many other blockchains, we wanted to make sure that that next layer on top of the sort of foundational L1 blockchain can also unlock permissionless innovation that we can't as one company think of. So that's the spirit for both V4, the protocol layer, Unichain, the chain layer, and then Uniswap Labs builds products on top of it. So we build a wallet, it's a consumer wallet. We build an API that lets centralized exchanges and other consumer platforms access the core trading infrastructure and also institutions if they want to. So I see it as all the same stack. It's the same stack with decentralized transaction infrastructure at the bottom layer. And I think that's what institutions actually are going to want, in addition to those of us who got into crypto in 2011 and the early days because our imagination was so captured by the potential for open permissionless finance. And the reason I think that is because institutions have lots of specific things that they need and they want, and they vary. And like our objective as Uniswap Labs isn't to sit with them and adapt what we do to what they need. It's to create broad infrastructure that is interoperable, that is transparent, and that is public, that they can then build on top of.
Give us an example of how an institution might interact with Unichain, and also talk to us a little bit about the perception, like the decentralized nature of Uniswap. Is that almost a deterrent to institutions who may want a little bit more control, a little bit more centralization as they kind of venture into new territory?
So what do we mean by decentralization, right? So decentralized systems that can approve transactions, that is better for people who don't have access to traditional financial systems. And I would argue it's actually appealing to even traditional institutions that want to be able to set their own parameters. So our business is not trying to translate all that business logic, but I think we've seen a huge shift in the past few years that financial institutions realize the most innovation happens in public. The most innovation happens in public blockchains. And so in that sense, if those are the decentralized systems, then that is advantageous. So I think that that's kind of an outdated notion, that there's sort of some kind of trade-off or conflict. And so in terms of Unichain, look, there are hundreds of teams that are building on top of Unichain who are building everything from trading applications to games to all kinds of what we would think of as more typical DeFi applications, tiny teams, individual developers, but also that same infrastructure is available to those people who are creating on-chain yield. And that on-chain yield, those on-chain yield funds, tokenized treasuries, that's appealing to many, many different kinds of participants, right? So it's appealing to retail investors all over the world. It's like we've seen with stablecoins. Retail investors all over the world want access to US dollars and to stablecoins. And that's why it's one of the biggest use cases in all of crypto. So I think that when we think about, take a step back, regardless of what got you into crypto in the first place, ultimately those of us who really believe in decentralization at the core, we want this to be the future of the financial system, and we want it to be a better future and a better outcome. And I think protecting those core pieces of decentralization and public innovation is really important, in part because it just allows much, much more use cases.
So think about where we are today and this event. We're uptown. We're at the Jazz Lincoln Center, and the essence of what's being announced today is really a hybrid approach, so that financial institutions can get more comfortable. It feels like this is a great thing for Uniswap Labs to attach to. What are those attachment points? Is it about getting tokenized assets onto Unichain? Is it about a hybrid approach for institutions to get through to your liquidity via these rails so that there's comfort and compliance? Like, where's the path, and what makes you so excited about being here today?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I mean, since I started digital assets at BlackRock in 2015, I've been hoping that we be at this point where the benefits of blockchains become so apparent that the world's largest distribution of assets, right, big financial institutions, sees those benefits and is ready and willing to accept. They have to release some control. That doesn't mean that they can't have their own standards, right? So I think that's kind of the recognition that you hear and that you see today. You just had Franklin Templeton on talking about how they are developing, they're operating nodes, they're building full stack, they're building wallets. And so they figured out a way to let this decentralized infrastructure ultimately still be applied in their own context. For Uniswap Labs, I mean, look, I hope at the end of this year you can use a Uniswap wallet and buy tokenized products just as you can buy meme coins, right, and trade meme coins. And so I hope that we see that simplification of the user experience. And then on Unichain, absolutely. Like, Unichain is built by the best in DeFi for DeFi. And it will be, we hope, a home for liquidity for all kinds of assets. And I think that ultimately liquidity leads markets, and I think that will be appealing to all kinds of real-world assets and tokenized assets.
Right now, I think if somebody wants to trade something on Uniswap, they go to Uniswap, right? You're going to go to use the application. To what extent do you want to abstract that in the future? Is it, I need to trade something, it's going to happen on Uniswap.
Yeah.
I may not have even been aware of that, but I know it's being done properly. Is that part of the UX journey for users in the future?
Yes, and that's why we built this API, because actually people trade on the Uniswap all the time without even realizing it.
Right.
So if you're trading in any aggregator, you're likely more than 50% of the time trading on the Uniswap protocol. If you are using Fireblocks, Talos, Ledger, you are also potentially swapping on the Uniswap protocol. So because it is decentralized, there are hundreds and thousands of intersection points with it that Uniswap Labs doesn't even touch, right? So there are many, it really is public infrastructure in that sense. But Uniswap Labs has built an API to make it a little bit simpler to access both the Uniswap protocol versions and also Uniswap X, which is a different kind of market structure. It aggregates on-chain and off-chain liquidity. And that just sort of simplifies if you are, for example, an asset manager or a fund that is newer to trading on-chain, then it might be a little simpler for you to integrate the API and to use it. So there's actually, I don't even know all the intersection points, right? But still just knowing that It's battle tested. It's battle tested technology that's been out there for years now. $2.75 trillion total trading. And again, that has been proven to be flexible enough to meet so many other different kinds of organizations and teams' needs. I think is really appealing to all kinds of players.
Fantastic.
Mary Katherine, thank you so much for joining us here at the desk.
Thanks.
We hope you enjoy the rest of the event.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
That was Uniswap Labs COO Mary Katherine Later. All right, we are keeping things moving right along here.
That was fun.
Yes, totally. That was a lot of fun. If you're just watching, if you're just tuning in, you're watching CoinDesk Live. We are coming to you from the Ondo Summit. I'm Jen Senesi. I'm here with Andy Bear. Andy, we're having a great time,
We're
aren't we?
having a great time. We're seeing a big range of different protocols and platforms today, all attached by this new announcement today. I think it's stunning. I think it's really great.
It's totally fantastic.
Yep.
We are now joined by our next guest, Ripple Chief Technology Officer, David Schwartz.
Hello.
How are you doing?
Great, it's great to be here.
Yeah, great to be here. Andy and I have been talking all day about this convergence of the traditional financial world and the crypto world that has been building, that both of us have been such a part of for the last so many years. Talk to me from your standpoint, from building Ripple for so long, from going through the ups and downs at Ripple, being here today, what it means for you.
It's tremendously exciting. I feel like we really are on the cusp of a mass institutional adoption, both of DeFi and of other blockchain technologies. I think this is also like one of the key obstacles to mass retail adoption. A lot of people in the space previously thought that retail adoption was like the big wave, but I think institutional adoption is a precursor. You have to connect to where people are. You have to go to where the value is. You can't build a new financial system from zero, ignoring the existing financial system where everybody's money is, where all the value is, where the real world is, trillions of dollars in value. You can't just say, oh, forget about all that, let's just build something new over here. That doesn't work. And so I think this wave of institutional adoption over the next year or two is going to be what's going to pave the way for mass retail adoption. And then we can deliver on those promises. Like, we all want to bank the unbanked, but like the unbanked, like they have to be able to spend their money to buy groceries and pay their phone bill, and so we have to have that institutional connectivity. And I don't think there are any obstacles. I think that's and I think this conference shows that.
You guys have shown a tremendous amount of resilience over the last couple of years and helped score some of the biggest wins from of the industry against those who doubted it. XRP is in one of our flagship indices and was a top performer. It's been an exciting couple of months. Like, how has the perception of the firm changed from inside and outside? A lot of people are taking a look at Ripple that really maybe hadn't before. How are you thinking about conveying what the company does to people who are looking at it for the first time?
Yeah, it has been a huge difference. 4 years ago, we had what I called the worst Christmas ever when I found out that the SEC was suing us.
Yes.
And a lot of people thought that would just be the end of our business, and it could have been. And I'm glad to say that the industry eventually rallied around recognizing the regulatory overreach, and I think things have gotten obviously a lot better since then. More recently, the changes in the United States over the past couple month or so have just been unbelievable, and it has unlocked business in the United States, but also business overseas. I think a lot. I didn't realize this until the change happened. There were a lot of other countries that kind of take their regulatory cues from the United States, and so when the United States didn't seem serious, they didn't really seem all that serious either. Now there's more international competition to bring in innovation. I think now we also, Ripple has a new product, RLUSD, which is a stable coin, which we think is going to be great for applications ranging from things like payments to DeFi, as a collateral, as a way of moving value from one place to another. And then, of course, the XRP ledger adding DeFi capability. That's not the first generation of DeFi capability was very experimental, and it was looking for like absurdly high yield. It was gambling, let's be honest, it was gambling. That's cool, like that attracts people. Vegas was built on gambling, right? But like the next wave of real utility is going to be built around things that are much less interesting. A savings account is not super interesting. It doesn't provide high yield, it doesn't have high risk. You don't check the balance of your savings account every day, but it has real world utility. And I think that avenue of real world utility that Ripple's leaned hard into is the tokenization of real world assets, from very useful financial products all the way to things like venture capital and real estate and that whole spectrum.
You mentioned RLUSD, and Andy asked one of our guests this earlier, and I want to get your opinion on it. Do we need so many stable coins? What is going to happen in this world of stable coins as this industry becomes more mature?
You know, we don't need that many stable coins. There's reasons why you might want more than one. There is actually some special.
Two, right?
well, one is diversification of risk, right? It would be really weird if we build this entire DeFi ecosystem that's all decentralized and it's all based on Ripple's reserve, and if Ripple collapses, the whole system collapses. There might be people who don't trust Ripple. I don't know why they wouldn't, but and they wouldn't be able to use RLUSD, and obviously the whole world, right? So yeah, you can make an argument that there's some small number, but there is some specialization that really does happen. Stablecoins aren't yield bearing, and so that they're not volatile, and they're tied to jurisdictions, they're tied to particular entities. So you could sort of imagine a world where you have this proliferation of millions of stablecoins. I don't think that's, millions obviously not true, but like a large number. I think there probably will be a bit of a shakeout and some consolidation. But I do think, 5, seems like roughly the right order of magnitude.
Right.
Yeah.
And what's special about RLUSD there? What are you going in with as the competitive advantage?
Well, RLUSD is issued through a U.S. trust based in New York State, which is like the gold standard for reliability. The reserve is just cash equivalents, short-term treasuries. It's audited on a regular basis. So as far as like the compliance, it's a gold standard. It's backed by Ripple. Ripple has an enormous balance sheet. We've been here for a long time. We're being as transparent as possible. So to some extent, all of that is table stakes, but we want to make sure we do that exactly right. We're going to be using it in our own payments flows. There's going to be applications in DeFi, a movement of value cross-chain. I think as we turn that curve to mass adoption, not just institutional adoption, but mass adoption, there's going to have to be ways, if my money is over here and I need to buy groceries, there's going to have to be ways to move, and I think the RLUSD is going to be well positioned to be that sort of value movement.
Do you think that there's, I was, on some podcast at some point, somebody made a great point that some payments need to be really, 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 really secure. Whereas if I Venmo Jen money for lunch, she knows where to find me if the payment fails. There are different layers, and Jen might be willing to pay less for security for the lunch transaction than moving $10 billion. Do you think that that's true, and does that set the stage for different levels of speed and cost versus security? How is your company thinking about that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
There is not going to be a one-size-fits-all solution. There's not going to be a one-chain world. It's not going to be a one-product world. There is no conceivable universe where Ripple is the only successful blockchain company, right? Like that's just impossible. There's going to be a broad range of things that people need, and you called out an important one, which is like there's applications that are not very cost sensitive, and you can trade off cost from many other things. There's applications that are just super cost sensitive. There's cases where speed is of the essence, and then there's multi-million-dollar transactions where making sure that we don't do it if we didn't really want to is of the essence. I think you're going to see that spectrum. We've focused, as Ripple as a company, like in our enterprise products, has focused mainly on institutional payments, where there's that balance. They're cost sensitive, but they're very sensitive to things like 24/7 availability, compliance, and then bringing costs down. But yeah, I think you will see a whole spectrum of products, and already you see chains that are focused on very fast payments, chains that are focused on very high security, and I think that's definitely why interoperability is going to be so important. If I have to try to figure out where your money is and if we have to work out the interoperability as humans, it's going to be inconvenient. It's going to have to just work.
You mentioned institutional adoption as the next step on the way to retail adoption, that real mass adoption. What needs to happen from an infrastructure perspective for this industry to be ready for that?
Well, there's a whole bunch of different pieces that we need, but one of the big ones is we need products that just work, that are easy to understand. We need people to be able to get their money in and out very easily. They need to be able to pay at retail points of sale. On the institutional adoption side, compliance has to be worked out. We need clear regulations, particularly in the US. If you look at I used to think that if the U.S. is not a friendly regulatory environment, just do it elsewhere. It doesn't really work. The U.S. puts its tendrils through. There are many people who are like, oh, we'll tokenize like U.S. treasuries, but we won't have a U.S. regulatory nexus. You can't build a business that way. So it's going to take institutions who commit and who stake out space in a growing part of the industry.
David, thank you very much for joining us here.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
So nice to talk to you.
That was Ripple CTO David Schwartz. Andy, we are just zooming through the day. I don't know why I'm doing this. That's what it feels like, right? We're having a great time here.
A lot of energy. A lot of good CoinDesk 20 names coming up and talking with us today.
We've
so
had
I'm excited.
a lot of big names, a lot of heavy hitters, a lot of people who are really pushing the space forward. One of them joins us here at the desk now. Citi's Global Head of Digital Assets, Treasury, and Trade Solutions, Ryan Rudd. Nice to see you again.
No.
Yeah, okay. Talk to us about this event. You know, Andy and I, we've talked about this with almost every one of our guests, but it really is a defining moment in two worlds coming together to advance us into the next era of finance. Just talk to us about how the discussions you're having here today.
Yeah, it's been great. And I was talking to one of my old colleagues from R3. You know, when I joined the space 10 plus years ago, we had several events like this where you had traditional enterprises as well as the fintechs here. The conversation is very different this time. It's very different. Like, people are putting things in production, eagerly getting clients on, where I feel like 10 years ago, you know, this cool technology came out, you're still trying to figure out what the application was, like how is it going to scale. We're here, it feels like we're seeing a lot of things go into production, which is wonderful.
It feels like one of the hallmarks of several years ago is everybody had their own kind of little basement project and said ours is going to be the best. This feels like the essence of the era where people start to reach out and work together, which is critical. I mean, we're both coming from a banking background and living with SROs and cooperation and things like this, the only way to make things work. Are we there yet, or do we have to wait longer?
But that's so true. Like, I think at the beginning, people thought it was proprietary, right? Like, if it was mine, it was nobody else's. Where the technology itself, decentralized, bringing multiple parties together to solve problems, like, as an industry, we have to work together, right, and solve these problems. So I do feel like it. I feel like the amount of interest that we've seen in the market, you could see it by the volumes. We're definitely at an inflection point in the market.
We know that banks have a tremendous headwind with respect to at least holding digital assets on balance sheets from capital requirements, things like that, not to mention, you know, reputational risk, and Citi is a conservative and large organization with a lot of power, but also a lot of reputation to preserve. Does this give the bank a way to sort of get more serious about blockchain technology in such a way that the wealth and retail side that also wants to have tokens in portfolios, is this another way to make the case for the investment and trading side to make sense for the firm?
So if I think about one of Citi's key strengths, it's our network, right? We serve 19,000 clients, 85% of them are Fortune 500. We're in, 90 plus markets. We move $5 trillion a day. So when I think about this space, it's another network, right? What does the future of networks look like? And how can Citi help with that, right? From, you talked about like capital requires, liquidity requirements, all that. As we are starting to see more client demand, that's what we're based on. So it has to do with like technology maturity, which we've seen in the last 10 years, regulatory clarity, operating, as you mentioned, within the risk frameworks that we have within a large enterprise. But as client demand, we want to make sure we meet our clients where they are at the journey.
Right.
Talk to us a little bit about how you see the future of global payments evolving from where you sit.
So, we've had numerous clients, like the thesis statement that they give us is they want always on 24/7 infrastructure, the speed of payments and money to match the speed of the internet, right? So how do we get to that phase? And we've done numerous things at Citi. We built Citi Token Services as one of them, where you can, our accounts can use tokenized money to move across our branches. We're live in US, Singapore, UK, with other branches coming on, so frictionless. So if it's 5 p.m. in New York and it's 5 a.m. in Singapore, you can still move that money. We're also updating our traditional rails, so we have solutions like real-time liquidity, 24/7. So it's really a two-pronged approach for the future, like updating our traditional infrastructure, but also thinking how is this technology as well as other emerging technologies going to shape the future.
What are some of the challenges you come up against? Because everyone who's sat at this desk today has spoken very positively about everything that's going on, and I know that things are advancing at a really quick pace, but there has to be some roadblocks standing in your way.
So as I look at this space and some of the challenges, for a large, highly regulated institution, like we need clarity. Like we need to make sure from a regulatory standpoint, technology standpoint, risk, compliance, all that what we're doing is safety and sound. Because that's what we're focused on, is our clients, making sure that any solution that we bring to the market really has that stability. That's what clients have come to us for all these years for. So providing clarity in this space on where we can operate and what we can do for clients, I think adds a real element of trust.
I mean, will the US regulatory changes set the tone? Because you just mentioned moving money across countries, you have the new regulatory environment in Europe, you kind of have to do something that keeps everybody happy. That must require immense staff, immense research, you can't make mistakes. Will the US, I think, this new chapter, do you think it will loosen things up in places like Singapore, Hong Kong, Central Europe?
So being a US domiciled entity, we're going to always fall to US regulation.
Yep.
That said, an example is like Citi Token Services. We went through the US 1179 process, but then in addition worked with, our first branch that we launched was in Singapore. So worked with the MAS. So every branch that we launch in,
yep,
working with those regulators as well to make sure that they understand the system, make sure they understand. So I think it'll be no different, with other assets as they enter onto the network.
That's super exciting.
I want to talk more about challenges here, right? When we're talking about integrating digital assets into really established infrastructure, really established frameworks, how does that work at an institution like Citi?
So all the traditional checks and balances, KYC, AML, sanction, all of that is still the same. None of that has changed. We've even added additional scrutiny on top of it from an internal governance and framework to make sure that we're doing it in a scalable and safe way. So I would say what you have in traditional banking, but marrying that with emerging technology, but to ensure that safety and soundness for our clients is really important. So I think that is going to continue, and I think it's needed, quite frankly, in this industry, right? So, because currently we're only serving Citi accounts with Citi Token Services. It's a private permission version of Ethereum because that's what we could operate within, right? So all the KYC, all that is same as it has always been. And from the capital requirements, we're still doing all the same that we've done traditionally.
What excites you most about what you're hearing today in today's announcement?
So I think today it's like bringing together, everyone, RWA has been kind of thrown around a lot. I would say the last 18 months to 2 years, but tokenizing deposit, it's a real world asset, right? And it's live. And we have dozens of clients on and, moving real multi-million in value. So I think it's really exciting to see that we're at this inflection point. And it's not just blockchain. And, it's hard to turn on the news without hearing something about, if it's AI, blockchain, quantum. I feel like we're at this inflection point with technology overall, where it's truly going to start changing multiple industries, finance being one of them.
What would convince you or the firm to move over to at least a semi-public blockchain outside of your private version of Ethereum?
There has to be a lot of regulatory clarity around that space. We saw SAB 121 repealed last week.
Right.
There's still some restrictions in that space, as well as connecting to a public chain. So, when we do our due diligence on transactions, a certain number of hops, if it was used in illicit behavior or unsanctioned countries that we're unable to do business, right? So I think that a lot of stuff has to change with our policymakers for us to feel comfortable to enter that space.
When you think about the future of finance, when you think about the integration of DeFi into banking, maybe not today, but in your future career, what does that look like?
It'll be interesting to see how these different products evolve, because I've had a bunch of DeFi, different assets approach me about, investing and that, thinking about for me, when I worked at IBM or R3, we were tokenizing everything under the sun, right? But it always went back to traditional rails for settlement. So here, starting with the fiat leg of it, the cash side of it, because you still need, if it's DVP or atomic settlement, you still need that cash leg of it on chain. So I think that it'll be interesting to see how it evolves once it becomes more enterprise.
Ryan, thank
Last
you so
quick
much.
question. No, I got one more. What's the first retail touch point? What's the first retail Citi customer going to see in terms of blockchain use?
So, I mean, in regards to like ETFs and stuff, like we do have like non-solicited, clients can access that.
Right.
But it's going to be really based on demand. What client, and like that's what products we're going to, bring to market is the one that our clients are asking us for. So, my guess is as good as yours.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Ryan, thank you very much. That was Citi's Global Head of Digital Assets, Treasury and Trade Solutions, Ryan Rugg. We are going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
We all want to believe in something. In Chinese, belief also means trust. We want to trust our systems and each other to explore new frontiers and build a future beyond what we know. For the past 10 years at Consensus, pioneers, builders, and dreamers have gathered together to create a new financial system where everyone has value. Join us at Consensus Hong Kong, where belief becomes real.
Regulation and compliance? Okay, good. Welcome back to CoinDesk Live. We are live at the Ondo Summit. This is the very first Ondo Summit, and it is happening in New York City. Today, we're celebrating Ondo, bringing institutional-grade finance on-chain, unveiling the next era of finance. Our next guest is the Chainalysis Director of Regulation and Compliance, Caitlyn Barnett. Hi, Caitlyn.
Hi, Jen.
How's it going?
Great. This is an amazing event.
Well, talk to me about what you've experienced so far. What kind of discussions have you been having? All day at the desk, we've been talking about this incredible moment where these two really different worlds have converged together to kind of usher us into the future of finance. Curious to hear about how you've been experiencing it.
Yeah, so the lineup of speakers has been absolutely amazing, and I think the main theme, other than just bringing TradFi and crypto together, is that 2025 is the year of this is really going to happen. Mm-hmm. We're no longer going to face the regulatory hurdles that we've faced for the past couple of years, and everyone is going full force into crypto.
Well, talk to me a little bit about that. Chairman Patrick McHenry joined me at the desk earlier today. I talked to him a little bit about what we heard in the press conference from the crypto and AI czar David Sachs just the other day. He said we could have some legislation within 100 days. McHenry told me, it's more likely 18 to 20 months because of how slow Washington goes. Talk to me about, from your perspective, what that means for the firms who are here today?
Yeah, so I think what that really means is there's no longer the scariness around it, right? Like nobody is telling them, no, don't do this. And so I think there's a lot of positivity going into 2025. So I agree with Congressman because he's right. Everything moves very, very slow. And I think we have this idea that it's going to happen very quickly, but I think the fact that this administration is so bullish on crypto, and we've already seen, for example, the rescindment of SAB 121, it's just a lot of really good indicators for the industry at large, specifically traditional finance, to jump into this space.
The rescindment of SAB 121 was, I think, a really crucial piece for a lot of people here in this room. Talk to me a little bit about what traditional financial institutions should be looking at from a compliance perspective as they start to come to more events like this, as they start to incorporate digital assets into their business strategies moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't plug blockchain analytics, right?
Yeah.
So I work for Chainalysis, which is the leading blockchain analytics provider. And a lot of what we've been doing over the past couple of years is doing education for a lot of the traditional financial institutions. You know, this space can seem very overwhelming and very scary. And so what we're showing is it's really not all that bad. In fact, when you look at the on-chain percentage of illicit activity, it's less than 1%. And so we're trying to show the traditional financial institutions that from a compliance perspective, the utilization of blockchain analytics can really make your job way easier.
Talk to me about that less than 1%. Compare that to years prior. Yeah, put that into perspective for me.
Yeah, so I think at the onset of crypto, all we heard about was money laundering and drugs, and I think the first thing you thought of was Mt. Gox, for example, huge hacks. And so what we're seeing as these more traditional players come into this space and as we have more regulation, the amount of illicit activity has steadily decreased year over year.
How are firms using blockchain analytics to inform their strategies and to inform their compliance?
Yeah, it's a great question. And we're talking to probably every major financial institution you can think of. And so you can use blockchain analytics in a number of different ways, whether it's you want to start banking cryptocurrency businesses, we're giving you their overall risk profile. And so you're not just relying on documentary evidence like traditional compliance. You're actually able to test those policies and procedures to make sure, okay, if you say you don't allow interactions with sanctions, are you actually telling the truth? You can really sanity check that. Blockchain analytics is also used for transaction monitoring. So when you think of traditional compliance monitoring fiat inflows and outflows, Chainalysis also provides software that allows you to monitor the inflows and outflows of crypto so you can quickly understand, are you dealing with a good counterparty or a bad counterparty? We also have major financial institutions who are looking to take the next Coinbase public, utilizing blockchain analytics to make informed decisions about those companies.
You said that 2025 is going to be like the year for this industry. What are some of the milestones you're looking towards that would indicate to you that we are on the right path?
I think a conference like this, quite candidly, like when you see this lineup of speakers coming from traditional finance as well as the crypto industry, I think the more institutional adoption that we see over the next year is going to be critical. Also, regulation would be great. I think we're going to see a much different way that, we're seeing enforcement. I don't think we're going to see regulation by enforcement. I think we're going to start to see smarter actions being brought rather than these strict liability things. So I think it's going to be really exciting.
I think you're right in the fact that we won't really see regulation by enforcement. I had a conversation with SEC Commissioner Hester Peirce recently, who's just laid out her framework for her new crypto task force. When you see changes like that happening from a regulatory perspective, what kind of future does that indicate we're working towards?
I mean, the fact that we even have a task force that's dedicated to this is just
finally.
Right. Like, I think that's just such a major sign that we're heading in the right direction. When you look at all the appointments that we've seen from this administration, David Zaks as a crypto czar, like, this is huge for this industry. We have the very top leaders in the US thinking about this from a strategic perspective to try to make sure that we are successful. And I do think that we're going to lead on the regulatory front, and we'll see see the rest of the world also start to adopt as well. There was just, I forget who said it, was probably Novogratz or Dan Moorhead, who was saying that one of the largest sovereign wealth funds, they were like, well, if the US is buying Bitcoin, we have to do it too. And so I think we are seeing, if we continue to adopt this technology, everyone else will as well.
Well, that's really interesting because I think a lot of folks in the industry have said in the past that the US is falling a little bit behind other jurisdictions. Right now, we're playing some catch up. I've asked a few other people at the desk today this question. Do you think that the US can catch up? And if so, would we lead the way when it comes to regulation?
I hope so. And based on what I'm hearing inside there, I think that's the right answer. I think we can catch up. I think we just have to be smarter about how we're handling a lot of these issues. I think we have to start delineating who's responsible for what. Great example, what does the SEC own versus the CFTC? If we can get clear swim lanes for these regulators, I really think we can start to make a lot of forward progress.
What kind of questions are institutions asking you when they come to Chainalysis, when they're looking to evaluate a new product or they're looking to evaluate an experiment in the digital assets industry? What are they asking you?
Everything and anything. So some of the conversations, talk about, isn't it just used for money laundering and drugs?
This is still a question.
It's still a question.
Okay, that's interesting because some people have come up here and they've painted a picture like it's all hunky-dory out there.
I would say post-November, it has changed drastically. And what I mean by that is we were kind of banging down doors trying to get meetings with a lot of the traditional financial institutions, whereas now we're being asked to come in and set up trainings or demos or talk to their strategy teams about what the art of the possible is. I think if you're in compliance, you're probably always a little scared of something new. And so from the compliance perspective, I think there is still that negative connotation associated with crypto. And so they're always scared that they're going to get in trouble, right? So they're asking the question, how can we do this? Please tell us it's not all that bad. What are the policies, procedures, technologies we can put in place to make this seamless?
And what do you tell them?
I say it's not that scary. I've also been in this space since 2016, so I had to be a little crazy, I guess, to jump into it back then, and I'm still here, so probably a lot crazy. But one of the things I always joke around about is everybody has germs, right? So there's no clean entity, just like no traditional financial institution is clean. There's always going to be illicit activity. It's really what you do about identifying that illicit activity, and then how do you remedy it? What are you doing? Are you filing suspicious activity reports? Are you working with your regulators to say, hey, look, we saw this. We're going to put these proactive measures in place to make sure it doesn't happen going forward.
It's interesting you say that. For a long time, firms were saying they were trying to work with regulators. They were not being given the opportunity to. It sounds like now, under this new SEC task force, it's going to be a lot easier to communicate with regulators. So it sounds like there is a bright path forward for crypto native firms, but also traditional finance firms.
I definitely think we have a very bright path forward. Again, the tone has changed drastically post-November, and it's really exciting to see these major players get involved. Because the more institutional players get involved, the better it is for the overall crypto ecosystem.
Someone who sat at the desk earlier today said the institutional advancements, institutional adoption is what will really lead to retail and mainstream adoption, and I think that's exactly right.
It totally is, because I think you still have a ton of retail investors who don't buy into this, but if you have JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, Citi, all the major names get into it, it just brings a level of trustworthiness that I think a lot of the crypto firms need to get it out there.
Caitlyn, thank you very much for joining me for this conversation. It was a pleasure. I will let you get back to the event.
Thank you so much. This was great.
Of course. That was Chainalysis Director of Regulation and Compliance, Caitlyn Barnett. Now, if you are just joining us, we are coming to you live from New York City, where Ondo Finance has announced an integrated infrastructure suite to bring U.S. financial markets onto the blockchain, which includes Ondo Chain, a layer 1 blockchain built to support institutional-grade financial markets. Joining me at the desk now is Sweet Foundation Chief Degen David Tixon. Hello.
Hi. Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Thanks for being here. I've said this a ton today. I'm going to say it again. What an event to bring real crypto native folks who've been building in the space for a long time together with the traditional finance folks who've been exploring the space maybe for a long time, maybe not building in it. Talk to me a little bit about your experience at the event today. What kind of discussions have you been having?
Yeah, the event's been amazing. I guess it's been not just Web3 builders. We have some of like the biggest like asset managers here today. So we have like BlackRock, Fidelity's also here, et cetera. So I guess crypto is definitely changing, especially in the last few months too. So even like the crypto ball that just recently happened in Washington, D.C., we had like senators, the Speaker of the House, et cetera, along with the top people in crypto. So it's definitely changing now that we both have traditional finance meeting Web3, and this is like the moment we've been waiting for all this time. So I've been super excited about where we are going in the industry and of having DeFi meet TradFi.
Totally. Let's talk a little bit about SWI for our audience who's watching at home. Talk to us about SWI. SWI is a layer 1. How is it differentiated from other layer 1s out there?
Yeah, it's highly differentiated. So a lot of the chains are, use the EVM. We use Move. And so our founder, Sam Blackshear, who's the CTO at Miston Labs, he created the Move language while he was at Facebook. And so it's totally different. It's easier for developers to develop on it. A lot of like developers that come from both the EVM, even a lot of Solana developers say it's a 10x improvement developing on SWI. So the developer platform is totally different. We also are a horizontal scalable blockchain. So as like demand goes up on SWI, we're able to expand. And so that's one of our like research initiatives that we announced, like Pilotfish. And so, yes, SWI's the lowest latency blockchain out there. We're at sub-second finality, and we are also object-oriented too. So most blockchains are account-based, and a lot of developers in traditional Web 2 programming are used to object-oriented programming, and that's what we offer for SWI, and other chains just don't offer that. So it's easier for developers to think about what actions they're doing and resolve these performance and safety improvements that we get by developers building on SWI.
What does it mean to be a chief degen?
So it's a fun title. I don't think anyone else has it in the space, but it's a fun title with big responsibilities. But how I see it, I'm supposed to bring like the top builders to go build on SWI. And so we've seen a lot of like top builders that are already like household names in the Web3 field build on SWI. Recently, we just announced Phantom integrated SWI, and this is like the first like blockchain layer 1 they've integrated outside of Solana, Bitcoin, and Ethereum. And so my job is to make sure SWI is a fun ecosystem and we have the best talent building on us.
Talk to me about the SWI ecosystem when it comes to working with institutional firms, because that's what today is all about. So talk to me a little bit with your degen hat on. How can institutions interact with SWI?
Yeah, we're seeing high amounts of institutional interest building on SWI. So our team comes from the DM Libra team, and so traditional finance and tackling like trillions of dollars moving on the rails of Web3 has always been the goal. And so, I guess we are all highly focused on institutional adoption. And so we're already working with like companies like Van Eck, Franklin Templeton, et cetera, already for like tokenizing assets on SWI. So we don't feel like we've achieved our goals at SWI until we're moving trillions of dollars on the network every day. And I think eventually that's the end state of blockchains, that we're not just trading meme tokens in the low billions of dollars daily. Eventually, real finance is going to meet blockchain technology. And this is the very beginning. So things like the Ondo Summit today is, getting us into that direction of where the industry is going. So I think we're still just at the very beginning of the Web3 story.
I call Franklin Templeton the degens of the TradFi world. They just really are experimenting so much with various different protocols and chains. You mentioned something there. You want to be able to move trillions of dollars on chain at SWI. How do you do that? Like, how do you even start to wrap your head around that? And what are the steps that you need to take to make that happen?
Yeah, so we're having these conversations already with a lot of these institutions, and some of the ones I mentioned and like other ones that we're working with and can't announce yet. But I guess eventually, we want trillions of dollars trading on SWI. We feel like we have the best developer platform out there. And when you're trading these high amounts of dollars, eventually the trillions of dollars, you need a super safe platform. And we feel SWI is like the safest smart contract platform out there. There's like a list of vulnerabilities that got listed by like a independent security auditing firm, and they found there's like 20 vulnerabilities on other chains and that are impossible on SWI. So we feel like to have like true adoption at the institutional level, you need high amounts of security, safety, and robustness of the network. And we feel SWI is that platform.
You say it's the safest, and you talk a little bit about auditing there, but talk to me about what happens to make you feel confident in saying it's the safest. How many audits does the chain go through? What happens behind the scenes to make sure that folks who are interacting on the chain are safe?
Yeah, so we work with some of the best like auditors in the space. So there's like OtterSec, for example, that we work with very closely. They audit a lot of the top like layer ones, and even like the founder has said like his favorite chain and that he has the most confidence in is SWI. And so a lot of the top like security experts that have worked with our team like love working with us and feel the technology is that notch above the rest. And so yeah, I think we definitely have that. And every developer that has tried SWI usually says, yeah, the best experience I've ever had developing in all my years of Web3 is on SWI. So we feel like we offer, the best like security and the best developer experience out there.
What do the next 12 to 18 months look like for you at SWI?
Yeah, so the next 12 to 18 months is going to be highly busy. And so we definitely want to onboard millions or billions of users onto SWI. And we do also have like one of the top like consumer platforms, the biggest that's ever going to has been in Web3 at this point, committed to building on SWI. I guess that'll be announced like shortly.
Which platform is it?
That'll be announced shortly.
Okay.
But so we feel highly confident we can be the blockchain that has the most users and most value being transacted on this year. So we're super excited about that. And I think we're at a point now that the regulations be very friendly towards crypto. And we'll see some of like these big players that are well known in the Web 2 world being more aggressive in the Web3 space. And also these traditional finance companies that are here today are going to be doing a lot more. So I think we're going to see a world that we tokenize everything.
That sounds like a fun world. Tell me this. I've asked a few people at the desk here today, and it's about the amount of layer ones that exist in the world. Do you think we're going to see a consolidation of layer ones, or can all of the layer ones that are popping up and that are evolving coexist?
So I think the end state of blockchains, there's only going to be like a few winners, and I think in most industries there's eventually one or two major players that becomes the default platform. I don't think we're at that point right now in Web3, but eventually, right now, I guess there's Apple for iOS, there's Android for phones, and so there's usually two, there's Coke and Pepsi. So eventually there's going to be like a world that there's going to be one main blockchain. I'm hoping and betting it's going to be SWI and possibly like other competitors that have most of the market share. And so there's just going to be these effects of the market where all the developers go, all the institutions are working with, that's going to happen. And so
that's interesting.
That's the bet I'm making right now.
Will SWI be the Coke or the Pepsi?
So I guess Coke has the bigger market share, so I'm hoping for the Coke.
Okay, and then talk to me about this just before we wrap up. I know we only have 1 minute left, but when you think about the convergence of TradFi and DeFi, what does that future look like that we're building towards?
So I guess the future is like starting to happen like right now. So a lot of these institutions are looking at what's happening and what are the interesting platforms in the Web3 space and what meets like the bar for like the type of high quality team that they want to work with. And definitely coming from like Facebook, having a very strong Silicon Valley team and like a blockchain made here in America, I think a lot of people are trusting what we're doing at like both at Misten Labs and the SWI Foundation as like the strategy that can help bring like mass adoption and these high value assets onto the chain. So these conversations are all happening right now. We're spending a lot of time with these institutions, a lot of time in DC lately. And so it's been a lot of fun, but I'm super excited. And I used to like work at BlackRock at one point and had left BlackRock to go into the world of Web3 and eventually knew there would be a moment that these two worlds are going to meet. And it's finally happening now. So this is the point of like the Web3 story I've been most excited for. And yes,
What a great way to wrap up the show. We've had a few BlackRock alumni join us at the desk here, and what an incredible time where we can have BlackRock alumni that's building in Web3 folks that are connecting TradFi folks to the crypto world. I think it's all really exciting, and it's come to a head here at this event. So David, thank you for joining me here at the desk.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Of course. That was Speed Foundation Chief Degen, David Tixon. All right, we have come to the end of our live programming from the Ondo Summit right here in New York City. We had so many incredible conversations. My co-host, Andy Baer, who's not here anymore, has left me for the day, but thank you to Andy for joining me. Thank you to our audience for watching this live stream. We will see you next time.